Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein attempted to fact-check Brennan in real time on Twitter. With the hashtag Read the Report, she rejected Brennan's claims that it is not known if traditional intelligence methods would have worked and that there was no cherry-picking during the investigation.
Well, that's not what former Senator Bob Kerrey wrote in the USA Today. Here's a guy that served on the Intel Committee for years, is friends of many members there. And he said, I don't need to read the report to know that the Democratic staff alone wrote it. The Republicans checked out early when they determined that their counterparts started out with a premise that the CIA was guilty and then worked to prove it. Fairness should dictate the examination of the documents alone. Do not eliminate the need for interviews conducted by the investigators. Isolated emails, memos, and transcripts can look much different when there is no context or perspective provided by those who sent, received, or recorded them. I can't feel, and this is Bob Kerrey, a guy who's friends with a lot of people on the committee. I am obviously, like a lot of Americans, really disturbed by a lot of things contained in the report. But it is a one-sided report where there is absolutely no context here.
That's not a dispute. That's not a dispute.
Absolutely no context here. And you just wonder why they weren't interested. They spent $40 million on this report, and yet they don't ask a single member that participated in that, or all the CIA directors that were directors while this was going on, whether it was effective or not.
That's not a dispute, but there are people who are the focus of this report, who are having news conferences and testifying at this, who are not disputing the facts inside the report and what happened, but the context.
I'm not concerned with what was in that report. You know, I'm the liberal on this show. I had no problem with it, to be honest with you. I'm not saying I have no problem with it. You know, these are terrorists. You know, we're trying to protect ourselves. You got to do what you got to do. You know, I don't know if I'm turning into a right-winger in my old age, but, you know, we are not privy to a lot what goes on in the world. You know, that old Jack Nicholson, you need me on that wall, you want me on that wall. I wonder how many people who lost.
You can't handle the truth.
Yeah, I wonder how many people who lost, friends and family and kids have done. I said, well, if we had done some of this earlier, maybe we could have saved them. Everybody would raise their hand and go, yay. And if you said to me, tomorrow, there's a gray area, but maybe by doing this would save my children or my friend's children or my friend's children's friends' children, I go, yes.
Joe, you and I were in Congress. I don't think many people appreciate the context. Shortly after this attack, the mood, the fervor, the appetite in Washington and around the country for Washington to do something. The questions that were being asked, how could this have happened? How could this have happened on this president's watch? How could we not know that terrorists were coming to hijack planes? They hijacked 4 planes. And remember, it's easy to sit back now and say they shouldn't have done this, shouldn't have done that. And I believe torture is inappropriate. But I listened to what Brennan said. He said, we were trying our hardest, and I happen to believe that. I remember running into a reporter right after the attacks were back in Congress, and he said, you know, it's amazing. There's so many people who didn't support President Bush who are now supporting him. Why do you think even amongst African-American voters, 85% approve of what he's doing? To Donnie's point, I said, I don't think African-Americans want to be attacked either. They want the country to be, want all of us to be safe and protected. So it's great to look back now and figure out how we don't do things that don't produce the right information and violate our values and principles, but put some of this in context, and you remember as well as I do.
Well, I do, and you know, Willie, that's what's so offensive, Willie, to me, is these same people that were saying do everything that's required, do whatever's required, and now going back and acting self-righteous. I think a bipartisan report would have been great, because what we would have learned is, okay, we weren't ready for this, and there were some excesses that are not consistent with American values that went on for the first year. We as a country screwed up. We messed up.
We're learning that in this too.
But the thing is, we don't have any context to that. This report, Mika, it's an absolute disgrace. What's contained in it is a disgrace, and the response is a disgrace. And as Bob Kerrey said, he said the worst consequence of this partisan report, here we have a Democrat talking about,
who was also on the 9/11 Commission with,
who was on the 9/11 Commission and who worked with Dianne Feinstein, said this partisan report it can be this disturbing fact. It contains no recommendations. This was a witch hunt. And how do you define a witch hunt? You define a witch hunt by a Rolling Stone story that goes after a fraternity without actually asking any questions or asking any of the accused. And here we have on the top level, and one of the most important issues that defines who we are as a country, a partisan report where they don't interview the accused, in this case, who aren't frat boys, but are the men and women they put on that wall and said, protect us. Please stop this from ever happening again. And then this is how Dianne Feinstein treats them. Because, by the way, I don't know if anybody paid attention. We haven't been attacked since September 11th. I'm not saying it's torture. We're against torture. Everybody's against torture. But the men and women of the CIA did what they were asked. And this is how Dianne Feinstein repays them.
Well, it just wasn't, excuse me, it just wasn't smart strategically either, or politically. If you're going to put out this report, even if you had interviewed the other side, even if you'd gotten on board from both sides, there would still be things in there that would be aberrant to people in this country. You'd still find examples of torture that you could point to and say, we can never do this again. And you would have been able to point back and say, and we talked to everybody involved, and here's what we found. You still would have had your evidence, but now you have the evidence without the support of the other side, so it allows people like us and others to torpedo it and to call it into question.
Well, you know, the thing is, though, they don't want the truth here. What they want is they want a partisan conclusion that not only was this morally abhorrent, but it produced no actionable